Is your guac about to get more expensive here within the next couple of days? Is the rare earth mania real this time? We'll talk about that. The 10-year yield continues its march towards zero. We told you a bunch of podcasts ago this was going to happen. It's headed in that direction. We also told you that this might be a real move in gold. It's holding 1340 as we speak. Horses are dying in Santa Anita. We will talk about that. We'll talk recession warnings. We'll talk social media. We'll talk the Fed. This is episode 22 of Bizarro World. I am Gerardo Del Real with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. Nick, how are you today?
If I recall, avocados are one of the few foods that farm chickens should not have.
Why is that? Oh, we're going to start off with some culture. I like this. Let's go. Why can't farm chickens have avocados?
You know, when you have chickens, farmyard chickens or whatever, you normally give them table scraps. At least when I was growing up, we would scrape our plates, what the dogs didn't get, into an old butter container. And that's what would get thrown to the chickens when you walk down to the barn the next morning. And, you know, they would all come out and eat all the table scraps. But I didn't know about the avocados then when I was little. But recently when we got chickens here, I was, reading about just raising chickens in general, setting up a coop, living conditions, etc. And it was, if I recall correctly, I'll Google it after and put up a link if I'm right, that you're not, one of the few things you're not supposed to give them is avocados. It's quasi poisonous, I think, in large enough doses. Not that you would want to really. I mean, I eat all my avocado. It's not like you say, it's expensive and about to get more expensive. It's not like there's leftover avocado in the Hodge household. But anyway, random knowledge for you. I'm doing good. How's it going?
I like it. Things are fantastic. I just got back last night from the 121 Mining Investment Conference in New York. It was a very, very interesting dynamic. The actual conference was on Tuesday and Wednesday. And if you kept up with the price of gold here during the week, Monday had a good solid move. Tuesday was kind of consolidating. So on Tuesday, when the conference kicked off, everybody was somber. I attended a panel, and there were 5 experts there, big funds, institutional guys and gals. And everybody was of the opinion that there would be some profit taking, and they weren't convinced that we would hold 1340 or frankly even 1330. The following day, it held and then pushed up over that 1340 mark. And here we are today. We record this on Friday. We're sitting right at that 1340 level. So you and I have had ongoing discussions here over the past couple of weeks. I think you were a bit more pessimistic, cautiously. I was a little bit more cautiously optimistic on the gold price. I'm an optimist by nature. I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to go on the record and say that this move in gold actually will hold. Now, profit taking is going to happen as it always does. This one feels a little bit different. I haven't seen any of the big dumping of gold to get that price down that usually happens when you have a $40 or $50 run in the price of gold. This last run is pretty impressive. If we look at the juniors, they don't believe it. The market doesn't believe that this move is going to hold in gold. And that actually, I tweeted earlier from the conference that 40 people telling me this wasn't going to hold made my contrarian self smile. And so, when it comes to the gold juniors, the best names out there, the Revival Golds, the Midas Golds, the Almaden Minerals, this may be the best buying opportunity in a decade. Almaden Minerals, for example, is trading at pre-discovery levels back in 2010. That's 9 years ago. Here we are, millions of ounces of gold later. And, it's sitting there at the 67-cent level Canadian. So this may be it. This may be it. I would get positioned. For those of you that are cautious out there, pick 3 or 4 names, initiate a small position, see if I'm right or wrong. If I'm wrong, you don't lose too much. If I'm right, you might be getting doubles and triples really, really quick. It's an interesting time. Thoughts, Nick?
I yawned for several weeks in a row, you'll remember, when we were talking about gold. And then last week I told you that the gold sector did not get a yawn. And I had, in fact, put a trade on personally on a leveraged gold ETF. So saw it getting a bit more exciting. And I'm not going to outright agree with the sentiment that it's going to hold this time, but I see indications that it's different this time. Here's just two of them. One is that people that I would consider in my sphere to be gold permables, like you said, do not believe it. I just see them hedging in their public comments uh, and writings saying the same things. We don't know if it's going to hold or expect profit taking or just speaking out of both sides of their mouth still, not convinced. I'm talking people who are typically bullish in gold. And so, uh, typical of being conditioned for so long, like Pavlov's dog, right? That we've just been downtrodden in the sector for so long that we don't believe it, or like crying wolf, or whatever. And then another indication I saw this week that it might be a bit different is, well, one, you got the whole rate curve thing, which you should talk about in a second, which you understand better than I do. I tell you all the time. And so I think we're due for a recession. That's one thing. But mainstream commentators like the so-called FinTwit people or whatever, Bloomberg people, CNBC people, the way they interpreted response to the jobs numbers today. I think there was only 75,000 jobs, and the market was expecting whatever the market was expecting, well over 100,000. And so it was supposed to be a dismal number, but the market ripped higher, right? Because why? Because the
Daddy
number was so
Jerome is
bad.
coming to the rescue.
Right, right, because the number was so bad that the Fed was going to give more alcohol in the punch. They were going to cut rates, and so I saw mainstream commentators write what people like you and I have been writing for years, saying that the market's been going up for all the wrong reasons. It's sort of a fake bull market. It's just because of buybacks and cheap rates and QE, et cetera. And normally that would be, the mainstream folks would sort of turn their nose up at that a bit, or their cufflinks or whatever. But this time I saw them saying what I just said. Why is the market going up if the number was so bad? Why is the market like asking for a rate cut? That's not why it should be going up. And I felt like hitting myself in the head with a hammer.
Agreed. Let's be absolutely clear, everybody. And then again, we said this really early in the year when everybody was calling for 2 or 3 rate hikes this year. We actually told you you're going to get at least 1 rate cut and possibly 2. It was a matter of math. Let's talk about the jobs number. It was 75,000 jobs created. The expectation was somewhere in the 180,000 range. Let's talk about the 10-year yield. The 10-year yield is now down to about a 2.06% 10-year yield. Let's compare that to where it can go. Germany, which has a robust economy, right? They have a negative 0.02% yield. That's a lot of basis points between where they're at and where we are at. Now, let's be clear about another thing. If you're not rich, if you're not a bank, if you don't own real estate or equities, the Fed doesn't give 2 fucks about you. So you should get positioned the way that the rich people are positioned, because that's who Sugar Daddy Jerome is going to take care of. And so look at the model in Japan. We can play this artificial stimulation propping up of the stock market game for a very long time. I've said this repeatedly. It seems like every month I write to subscribers that we have to play the long game, because the long game is Europe blows up first, Japan blows up first, we're the cleanest dirty shirt, being the US, in the laundry basket. That is absolutely still the case. So everybody that's calling for a stock market crash in the US indices, I'll go on record right now again and tell you that's not going to happen. Anybody that doesn't understand the problems that the rest of the world has and only looks at the stock market from a US-centric perspective would be well versed and suited to get familiar with what's happening in Europe, what's happened in Japan, how long it's happened for, what the ECB is doing. It's a mess out there, and the U.S. is going to benefit from it. And again, the last point I'll make, and we talked about this last week, 2020 is an election year here in the U.S. There is no way in hell that the Fed steps in and cuts or raises rates, during an election year. It's just not going to happen. So the market is one way right now. Expect rate cuts. Expect borrowing to get cheaper to stimulate the real estate market, to stimulate banks and the financial institutions in this country. And yes, to stimulate the U.S. indices. That's going to happen. I think that's why gold is holding its gains, and the ETFs are piling in and not actually hedging as much as they have in the past. So let's see if it holds. I could be wrong about the short-term move. I do not believe I am wrong about the coming bull market that's coming. It's going to be, frankly, why we've taken the pain over the last several years.
What is the next technical level for gold?
I've said we have to break 1374 and hold it. On a monthly level, if we close this month above 1354, I think if I look back over the past 3 or 4 months, I don't think that we've been able to hold that. And I'm freestyling here, but the critical one for me is that 1374 level. If we can break that on a monthly basis, then we're off to the races to 1400. And if you look at a 3 to 5 year chart, there's not much happening between 1400 and 1550. So if we can break 1374 on the monthly, hold 1400, I expect a ramp up to 1550 within 60 days of hitting that 1375 level and holding it.
It's funny how fast things turn. You were saying, you're at the conference, and I want to hear more about the conference, that it was, downtrodden on the early
Tuesday.
days. And then,
Yeah, and then by Wednesday,
right.
everybody had a pep in their step, and everybody wanted to talk gold again, and everybody wanted to talk about the best deposits. And again, there's the juniors aren't responding yet. Midas Gold was down 7% today, partly on, a minor issue that I don't want to get too much into, because I have an interview with CEO Stephen Quinn on Tuesday where we'll talk about it in detail. But, I think that the junior market and speculators in the space do not believe this move. And that makes me smile, because they've believed all the other ones. Where I haven't, I've been very cautious, and I've told subscribers for years, it's not prime time for gold yet. We're just not there yet. I actually think we're here now. And I'm going to say something the gold bugs will hate me for. I think it's time for cryptos again too. I think the big, I think the big misunderstanding out there is that they're in competition, right? Sure, the cryptocurrency craze took speculative capital out of the gold space, but the next move, the next big mega trend isn't cryptos versus gold. The next big mega trend is private assets dominating the market over public assets. So when I say public assets, I mean things like bonds, right? That 10-year yield getting down to 206. The bond market's catching a bid right now. That eventually will turn, and it'll blow up overseas first. But confidence in governments is dying. That will be expressed in the bond market, and there will be a pivot away from municipal bonds, treasuries, and eventually that the speculative capital will come back to gold and cryptos, and they'll rise together. And the strongest currencies, this is another thing that gold bugs won't like. The dollar, everybody calling for the dollar crash because it's been down this week, that'll reverse before year end. And I think there's going to come a scenario here in the next 6 months where gold, cryptos, and the dollar are on a savage bull market that's going to be fun as all hell. Take that for contrarian.
It's almost like the first crypto run was training foot soldiers for the gold army.
A wise man once said, and who is that wise man, Mr. Hodge?
I don't know.
Mr. Hodge, that's who that wise man was.
And I agree with you. And the money, the size of the crypto market is so small that it need not compete with gold, especially if global capital is fleeing for safe havens. And so just to touch on this emotional low thing, once again, it's always when you least expect it that the market turns, right? Whether it's your example at the conference or the infighting on Twitter among proponents of precious metals and junior miners that I've been speaking about over the past couple of weeks. It's always right after those emotional lows, and often stock price lows, that the inflection point comes, right? And we've seen that in rare earths where quality companies with quality deposits have seen their stocks drift to all-time lows, and then boom, you get this little flare up with the trade war and in China threatening, like again, you had been writing about several months prior in summer of last year. And so just following that same script again, hitting a low, capitulation, whatever, inflection, and then boom, hockey stick up and to the right. It remains to be seen if this rare earth thing is going to last. But, I wanted to get a bit more in depth. I'm going to play host now for a bit. I wanted to get more in depth about the rare earth boom last time, and maybe have you talk a little bit more in depth about your experience and some of the successes you had, some of the companies you were involved with. Feel free to get as personal as you want with how you were involved with those companies, but also how quickly they rose and how exciting that was, because I've talked to folks, and you have as well, and you were involved in this. I wasn't, where just think about the past couple of years where, at least I know, I've written checks for companies at 40 cents and then again at 10 cents. But in rare earths in 2010 and 2011, you were writing checks at 25 cents and then 60 days later at $1. Just can you talk a couple of minutes about the what happened back then?
Absolutely.
And your involvement in it, not just the China thing.
Sure, yeah, and I'll go back a little bit. Let's kind of step back and just provide a bit of context, right? From the 60s to the 80s, the U.S. was the global leader in rare earth mineral production. They had a mine out in California, and that mine eventually closed, right? And so China gained ground in the 90s at an incredible rate. They came in, and I recall there was a quote from, I forget exactly who it was from, but it was a high up public official in China that said that the goal of China was for them to be the Saudi Arabia of rare earths. And so China, which always plays the long game, understood that if you could dominate the production and the refining of these rare earths, because the deposits themselves are not very rare. It's the extraction process, which is dirty. It pollutes. And frankly, nobody wants it in their backyard. And so China understood that if they could come in and buy assets all around the world and take, the production side of it and the refining side of it, and make China home base for that, that they could control supply chains of all the major technologies. We're talking satellites, lasers, jet engines, radar, you name it. Stuff the military needs, stuff you need every day, stuff in your iPhone. And they did that very, very well. We fast forward to 2010, and there's some analogs here with what's going on today. In 2010, a small little Chinese fishing captain, right, had a little small boat, and he was found to be in waters that were under dispute by both Japan and China. China went ahead and confiscated the ship, accused Japan of basically being in their territory. An argument ensued, and so what China did was they said, okay, we're going to restrict the supply of rare earth minerals to you and everyone else. And a panic hit. And so I'll share a personal story. There were two companies specifically that I loaded up on, and I was fortunate enough to have people in the space, in the industry, that understood this before I did, that said, listen, don't bet the house on this, but take a position that would be significant enough to you if this went up tenfold, and hold that, and let's see what happens with it. And so there was a company named Rare Element Resources. I believe I got into that company at 16 cents. And that 16 cents turned into 50 cents in a matter of weeks. 50 cents turned to $3 in a matter of weeks again. And, within I think a 12-month time span, that 16-cent stock rose. I think it got as high as $18.50 or $19. I tapped out at $16. It wasn't a humongous stake for me, but it was large enough to make me think I could do this for a living, and absolutely encouraged my my speculative impulse that always existed. It was great to be able to monetize that, and I've been addicted to the space ever since, right? So the rare earth mania really was a precursor of what I see happening with gold stocks, right? And again, some more context on a personal note, I had also just seen the global financial crisis of 2008 and what happened to gold, and how that was used as a hedge during a time of fear. And, gold ran up to 1900. The gold stocks were on fire. Dumbass majors started overpaying for every asset that they could buy because they thought scale equaled a bigger market cap. It would command a bigger market cap. And of course, we know what happened there as well. Things turned around. And with the exception of 2016, for a couple of months, we really haven't had a bull market in gold since. So back to my rare earth story. All of those stocks that turned out to be, 16 cents to $18, those were round trips, right? And the reason they were round trips is the World Trade Organization stepped up and ruled that China could not impose export limits. So it said, China, you control, the bulk of production of these very, very important metals. You are not going to be able to restrict it. You are a member of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and so not going to happen. We're not doing that, and they were forced to once again become the global supplier of these rare earths. And so I just wrote a piece for the Outsider Club last week. And prior to that, the week before, I got it out to subscribers of Junior Mining Monthly. But, I talked about what the end game is and the analogs this time around. And this time around, I believe that China has the financial wherewithal to actually go to the WTO and tell them to go fuck themselves and basically explain to them that, they no longer wish to be members. And if that actually is what happens, financial institutions will be restructured as we know them. I see currencies drastically having to restructure themselves. I think that the World Financial Center is slowly and surely shifting towards China. I do think the U.S. has a small window to address that. But look, let's be frank. We live in the U.S. here. We have infrastructure problems. We have healthcare issues. We have so many states on the verge of bankruptcy or mathematically already bankrupt, right? And so when do we address those issues as a country here? Let's just talk financially. And if we don't address them now when money is cheap, how are we going to address them later when rates go back up? Because they will go back up. The business cycle is the business cycle, folks. You can only do this for a while. You can do it for a while, as Japan has showed, but there will be limits. Eventually, this all implodes, and we have to start from scratch. So if we don't take care of these issues that are real, legitimate problems that are dangers to our existence as the global financial powerhouse, we're not going to be able to do it in 5, 10, or 15 years. So, I think the long game is China continues to buy up U.S. treasuries, and one day the U.S. is really, really vulnerable. The dollar isn't the safe haven. The Chinese currency will be the safe haven, and I think they'll lock that up by dumping treasuries at a pace and a rate that the market won't be able to absorb. And you think 2008 was something? Watch when that one happens.
Well, holy cow! That was brilliant. That was brilliant, and I'll make it even more sad is that there's going to come a time, and I think you've said this as well, where the U.S. is just going to simply become the number 2 economy in the world. The only scary thing is that there's aircraft carriers and nuclear weapons involved.
Correct. So again,
where there hasn't been in previous transitions of global economic powerhouses in previous empires. I mean, there's been wars, but there's never been nuclear weapons.
Well, I'll say this. Let's remember the 40s, and let's remember what we did, right, to Japan. That was the last time that power really shifted, right? We got Bretton Woods, we got the U.S. became the dominant force, and that at that time, that was the icing on the cake. It was tragic. It was, if you know your history, I think it was unnecessary. But it was a hell of a nasty statement to make that we were number 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's hope that this is a financial catastrophe that ends up happening that forces everybody to get their house in order individually and collectively. And not something on that scale that signals to the world that the U.S. is no longer the behemoth that it was. And let's hope that, China is kinder to us, frankly, than we were to Japan and a lot of the world.
What else?
The Cubs are in first place. That's awesome. That makes me happy. We lighten it up a little bit. Sorry to be so grim, folks. That's the next 30 years in my simple brain in a nutshell.
No, I think that's, a lot of us see it that way. And, one of the reasons that we're have the political views we do, or are firearms owners, or are gold bugs, or are worried about the debt, or, whatever it is, and also, perhaps some of the underlying reasons for the things you see in the world around you, why the world is so bizarre. I hate to mention the title of the podcast every single time, but that's why we're here. That's what we're talking about. And all the stuff you see is a function of those cycles, those debt cycles, the money in the world, the inflation, the not money in the world, the deflation, the fake meat, the real meat, etc., the strikes, the gutters. Um, that's why we're here.
So how do you make money from it, right? Let's break it back down to people. What people really want to know in the short term is if you can't do anything about, policy in this country or your country, wherever you live, how can you at least profit from it so that you can have some sort of hedge for your family and for yourself? And so, let's talk some ideas. The gold space. I've mentioned Almaden. I've mentioned Revival Gold. There any names that you want to share, and then I want to talk a crypto name that we've talked up quite a bit. And again, full disclosure, everybody, if we mention these names, we likely own them, have owned them, or will own them. So we like to both put our money where our mouth is, and we are biased in everything that we talk about, or at least I am, because if not, I wouldn't be talking about it, right?
Yeah, I own those gold companies. I write about those gold companies, Midas, Almaden, Revival. One that's going to trade here. I actually should mention it because it was supposed to trade on the 5th, and exchanges being exchanges, it's going to trade on the 10th, Magna Gold. And then some of the bigger names, of course, man, like Franco Nevada pays a dividend, like stuff like that. I mean, especially for the environment that, you know, we see we see coming. And then I don't want to throw a ton of names out there, but I look at back to basics: deposits, teams, people, share structure. Where's the gold going to come from? Where's the copper going to come from? Where's the zinc and nickel going to come from that are going to go in the batteries and power the world? Companies like the Cujo Coppers of the world, for example,
Cucho?
and
Yeah,
and and
that's a great name.
and and we'll talk about Hydro 66 before we even talk about crypto. I saw a report this week out. I think it was, gosh, MIT Technology Review or something. I'll dig up the link. We'll put it up. About how dirty it is to program an AI thing, how dirty it is to program a robot to run on artificial intelligence. Because why? Because of all the electricity it takes to power the data centers that run the algorithms that control the robot. And my first thought was, well, you know what? It wouldn't be so dirty if your servers were in Sweden being powered by hydroelectricity. And that's just one of the facets of the thesis behind investing in Hydro 66 is high power computing and co-location. It's really the has been the bulk of their business for the past whatever 12 months while crypto prices were low again, is leasing part of their server halls for people that need super redundant power and do super critical computing, high speed calculations or high speed video rendering, or whatever you use HPC for, high powered computing. And so when you see those things, it's like a no brainer. It's like, yeah, no shit, it takes a lot of energy to run servers to program robots, and yeah, no crap, it takes a lot of electricity to run servers for all these driverless cars with all ththese sensors that are feeding data into computers. It's just a no brainer to put your servers in a place with cheap power costs and uh, excess power and clean power. And so and that's without even talking about crypto mining. And as I say that, Bitcoin went back over $8,000 today, and it's just like printing money for these folks, especially when they have their own algorithms that tell them when it's time to buy more mining equipment based on the cycles of the crypto algorithms themselves. And so I'm not smart enough to understand any of that, but I can regurgitate it, and I can see it, and I can recognize a good investment when I see one. I don't know, Gerardo, what else you wanted to say about Hydro 66, but go ahead.
Well, no, I wanted to give you your flowers while you're still here, Nick, and hopefully you're with us for a long time. But on this one, you absolutely deserve it. You called the bottom in the crypto space, if I recall correctly, when Bitcoin was at 3,600. You actually did it on this podcast. So for all 25 of you that are listening that actually said, oh, shit, what is this Hydro 66 play, which, by the way, was trading at 26 cents at the time, and listen to Nick say, I think this is the bottom because you can't produce below this $3,600 level. Nobody's profitable, so it's going to drive all the weaker players out of the market, and it's going to embolden the strong hands that are able to raise capital and have a sustainable business model to go and acquire assets that are accretive. What's happened since then? Bitcoin went from 3,600. We're now at 8,000. I think it's been less than a month and a half since you called that low. And what's happened to Hydro 66? It's gone from 26 cents to 51 cents Canadian as we speak. Again, this is all free information, folks. You do with it as you please. We don't give investment advice. We like to provide ideas. Obviously, we're full of opinions, some smarter than others, but kudos to you. Flowers to you, Mr. Hodge.
Well, thanks. I mean, I get
Take a damn
information
compliment, Nick. Take a damn compliment.
I appreciate it.
Tell me about your process of how you get information, process, digest it, apply it.
No, I will never do that. I will pat my chest for one more second. I gave an interview at the very top. I gave an interview that was published on, it was like December 14th or December 17th, 2017, where I gave a warning to crypto investors that it wasn't going any higher. So top and bottom. And no, that's it.
I like it. I like it. Let's talk social media. More banning on social media. Before I ask you your opinion, let me be absolutely clear about my opinion about banning voices. Free speech should be protected. Now, free speech should be protected up to the point where you are violently when you are threatening people with violence. That is a different thing. Anything up until that point, fuck your feelings, right? Look, there's people. Yeah, I had a situation a month and a half ago, where a guy flipped me off and, yelled his white supremacist thing and whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop. All good. You can yell whatever you want to yell up until the point where you approach my vehicle or my house. At that point, it becomes a different thing. So I think free speech on social media should be treated the way it should be treated according to the law, right? Everybody has the right to march for whatever they feel. You're a Cardinal fan. You don't like the Cubs. Fuck the Cubs. Great. You can say all you want about that until it becomes physically threatening to anybody involved. That's my 2 cents. We can't ban opinions that we don't like just because we don't like the opinions. Now, if those opinions happen to coincide and go hand in hand with actual violence, we are talking about a different thing now. And yes, those people, those individuals, those groups, if they are known and they have a track record and they're out there being violent and using that speech to actually physically harm people, then that's a whole different thing, whole different subject. That's not a free speech thing. That's assault. That's illegal. But free speech, we need an exchange of ideas in this country. And if your idea is better, it'll win out.
Well, that's it. I think you said it. I don't have much more to add. I talked about it. I don't keep track of time really, but a couple months ago, whenever Alex Jones was banned from whatever platform he was banned from, then and it's not just on the far right or the extreme right or whatever you want to call it. There's liberals being banned as well, and for things that are not violent. So yeah, let me be clear. I'm with you. Free speech is free speech. Your feelings don't matter. But people are being kicked off platforms like Twitter now for not violent things on both sides of the political spectrum. And I saw, and we could talk about Eastside Distilling if you want, but I saw John Rich tweeting today that his song "Shut Up About Politics," which is the #1 country song in the country right now, was banned from Twitter. So, if we're banning mainstream country songs because they mention the word politics or shut up about politics, I haven't really formed my thoughts, but it just seems to me that they're trying to sanitize. They're trying to make the discussion so vanilla, all in the name of someone or someone not getting their feelings hurt. And Instagram, I think, was really the leader in this, where you're not allowed to, say a nasty comment on someone's picture, where they can report you and have the comment removed. And um, that's not reality, right? That's something that's fake. It's, you're scrubbing reality. You're suppressing someone's opinion that's not being violent. And so it's sanitized and it's dangerous, right? I mean, that's 1984 stuff. That's Orwell stuff. It's quite dangerous. And I just want to just keep mentioning, make sure it's in the dialogue because it's happening and it's tough to combat. If you use those platforms as a voice and the platform bans you, well, where's your voice then, right? And they're private companies, so there might be litigation, et cetera, and that's beyond my pay grade. But something to pay attention to, something to watch, and something that is certainly happening.
We can't turn into an algorithm society, folks, where we say these words are bad, these words are good, so you can only say and hear these words. I want to hear how stupid Alex Jones sounds every week, so I know what to pay attention to. Because if he has 20 million people following him, listening to half the shit that he says, saying that, Sandy Hook was a falsehood and, kids didn't get killed, these people were actors. I want to hear that dumbass out there saying it so I can point to it and talk to people that have half a brain and say, do you think that man is suitable for following? And if you do, that just tells me something more about you. And I want to know that. I would much rather know who the white supremacists are or who the nationalists are or who the, whatever extremists, left or right, who they are. I would rather know who they are so I could prepare for that than have to wonder if everybody's it. Because that's kind of what happens when you don't know how people feel. You start looking at the world in a way that you think everybody is that person. Everybody's a white supremacist. Every Mexican guy is a cartel member, right? Every black kid with a hoodie is going to rob me. The world just isn't like that, folks. Get out there and travel a little bit. Talk with different people. Exchange ideas respectfully. And we have so much more in common, regardless of income level or ethnicity or nationality, than we do have differences. Are there real differences? Absolutely. Are they what we fear most? No. It's kind of like the stock market. It's a fear and greed thing. Neither one is an accurate description of what is out there in the real world. And again, if social media, where so many people depend on that for an exchange of views, if they start sanitizing to the point where it's just an algorithm and keywords, then, maybe there's an opportunity there to come up with a different type of social media.
Oh, what are my thoughts? Yeah, the free exchange of ideas, the freedom of speech, and the freedom of expression, those are like foundations of a free society. And so when you start homogenizing those, and when you start scrubbing those, it makes you deviate from being a truly free society, and that is not a good thing.
What'd you call me, a homogenizer?
Yes, you and that damn milk.
I love it. Mr. Hodge, do you have any positive stories? I was going to talk about the horses that keep dying at Santa Anita. I don't want to talk about that this week because I think this has been a pretty heavy podcast thus far. We talked about the U.S. and China. Word of caution on that front, when I tell you that I invested or speculated, is a more accurate word, in a company that went from 16 cents to $18.50. I should caution in case I didn't. That was a round trip ticket. I was fortunate enough to get out before it turned back. Another side note, actually was trading options around that. So, I mean, there was a day where literally I think I turned $2,000 into like $48,000, bought a ticket to go visit my parents in Mexico, called my brother, sent him some money, and was lucky enough to do that a couple of times. That's how crazy and extreme the greed side can get. Take a little bit off the top on your way up, guys. If you get a 5-bagger, a 10-bagger, don't be afraid to take a little bit off. Go take your husband or your wife out to dinner. Buy something nice for the kids. Do something nice for yourself. And then, let a little bit of it ride and see how much the mania lasts. But don't misinterpret what happened last time as a blueprint for what will happen this time. What you can always count on is fear, and you can count on greed. The extremes are the extremes. We don't know what it's going to be. So just be cautious.
You have got to sell. The money's not real anyway, and you can't eat it.
Well said. Well said. Well said. How it
Positive stories.
positive
There was a,
stories.
go ahead.
Yes. No,
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 you
no,
were
no.
going to
I
ask
was
me.
I was going to ask you again. I was going to ask you about your pond cuz I know it's that time where it's thawing out and you're hunting, you're getting turkeys finally. How's that coming along? I'm going to know about that.
The turkey season is over. It ended at the end of May. We don't hunt again until dove season in September. But we have been fishing, me and my 3-year-old girl. We have been catching bass and sunfish from the pond. She can identify the difference between the two kinds of fish and knows their names.
Get
She can
out of
reel that.
here. I
She
love
can
it.
reel she can reel them in, and it's all planted down there with, if you really want to know, it's a mix of, I forget the percentages, but black oil, sunflower seed, milky vetch, deer vetch, giant or colossal red clover, and a grass that deer and elk are fond of called Sanfoin, Sanfoin. And then I put 50 pounds of Milo in the spreader as well, or some people call that sorghum. It's like a 4 foot tall grass that gets a real thick clump of grains at the top. So that's all growing away down there, and come fall time, all the critters will want to eat all that stuff. So yeah, coming along, we like it.
Fascinating
Positive
stuff.
stories.
Fascinating stuff. That's why I asked. That's good stuff, man.
There was a giant double rainbow in Spokane this week. We had a really kind of weird thunderstorm come through, and it was still sunny. And I can post a picture, but rare double rainbow arcing the city and the bridges and the river. That was fantastic and informational. There was a health study. You know how everybody is counting their steps these days. Somebody went ahead and did a study. How many steps are good? How many steps are bad? The ideal step count for a day is 4,500 steps. It turns out, at least for this study, which focused on women, I forget how long, but the women who walked an average of 4,500 steps a day lived the longest in the study. The benefit of walking plateaued once you got to 7,500 steps a day. So there is a threshold to the benefit, but just quantifying what we already knew. Get up off your butt.
I love it. I love it. So if we kind of intertwine that with the other two studies that I read earlier in the year, where it said if you like to dabble in a alcoholic beverage or 10 from time to time, the best way to offset that, according to this study, was to enjoy a nice puff, whether it's a vape or a smoke, but of cannabis, right? They said marijuana drastically reduces the ill effects of alcohol. So again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you doctor advice or health advice. Go and look it up and figure out if it's something for you. But hey, walk, have a couple of glasses of wine, little puff of the cannabis from time to time, and you might just live a longer, healthier life.
Everything in moderation except chickens and avocados.
Because it'll cost you. And you'll piss off the chickens. Good stuff. Anything else on the docket? Are we going to make this one a short one and let people get on with their week?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We talked different stock names. We talked Hydro 66. I mentioned it's gone from 26 cents to 51 cents. At that market cap, at the current market cap, I still think it's absolutely worth looking at. I think it's a bargain. I think you'd be, it's probably a good speculation, but we'll see. We'll talk about it in a month or two again, and we'll see what's happened since then. Them closing on that $40 million financing, which will lead to a massive build out, is going to be critical, and that is supposed to happen, if I'm not mistaken, by month's end, correct?
Well, I was just going to say podcasts are supposed to be in depth, so I'll get in depth for you for a second. Just look at What's it trading with now? A $50 million market cap? Is that right? What's the current market cap of Hydro 66? You
Let,
know off the top of your head?
let's put it 60 pre-deal closing, right? They have
They,
127 million shares outstanding. It closed today at, I believe, 51 cents. So quick
there you
math
go.
in my head. Yeah, it tells me it's about 64 million or so market cap. That would be Canadian.
So soon 40 million of that US is going to be backed by cash. So what's nearly 100% of that is going to be backed by cash very soon. Granted, they're going to double the share count. They're going to give whatever is currently out now to the shareholders of the private company that they are acquiring. But as I understand it, that's just a few very long-term, strong-handed shareholders as well. So it's not like those shares are going willy-nilly all over the place. So the share structure is going to be as tight as it is now with the few large shareholders like David Rowe that own Hydro 66. So it's not like there's going to be a big float out there. There's still not going to be a lot of stock for the public. And so you're going to have this entity that comes trading with $40 million US in cash, whatever the number is, 200 megawatts of installed capacity. 150 of that are roughly built out. I'm making numbers up now, but then the 40 million they're raising is to build out the rest of it. A contract with a Japanese firm that they're building out for to fulfill orders for, and a blended management of the two teams that are both obviously well established in the space and bring different sets of expertise, a diverse geographic footprint as far as where the data centers are and the services they can provide, and a blending of the customers. So you're going to have an entity here that's whatever the largest, whatever they're calling it, largest blockchain infrastructure company in the world. It's going to become, by default, it almost has to become the crypto ETF of North America and North American exchanges. And so I don't know, it's pretty damn exciting. I don't want to like climb over a wall and it not happen, but it seems like everything's right. Everything is lining up. The space is hot. They certainly at $8,000 are making a lot of money on cryptos. They make money below $4,000. So yeah, exciting.
Agreed. And the one common denominator to the diversification of data centers and mining capabilities, it's Texas, Louisiana, and Sweden. And obviously, if you look at all three of those, the one common denominator is going to be lower quartile energy cost. Energy cost, of course, being the biggest input to mining. Um, this is a real play, folks, with real people. We said that to you back when Nick and I toured the Hydro 66 facilities. No shade to Hive, but we mentioned that when we saw the Hive facility from the exterior anyway, there didn't appear to be much action happening. We've seen subsequently what's happened there with Genesis Mining and Hive, and the bickering there, and neither side being happy with how that was rolled out there. This is a different monster. And again, if Bitcoin does nothing but hold up to 8,000, this is a cash cow. If we get any kind of resemblance to the mania that happened last time, and a lot of people that follow the space that are a lot smarter than I am believe that's exactly what's coming, then 50 cents Canadian may seem like a steal very, very soon.
Yep.
I love it. Nick, it's a pleasure as always. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
Nope. That's it. I'm good.
I like it. Be nice to each other, everybody. Take care of each other. Be good. Enjoy your week. Episode 22 of Bizarro World. Have a good one, everyone.
See ya.